I want to challenge another dissident right orthodoxy today, so you're not going to like this one either, but stick with me, okay? I want to ask a question. Are we faced with a deliberate conspiracy at the highest levels of government to brown us out of existence, Kalergi style? Or are we just at a unique time and place in history where it really is economic forces and pressures of modernity, we'll get to that have culminated to make migration the unprecedented challenge that our countries weren't prepared for and have also mismanaged? So my thesis is it's really economic forces and how we are really at the behest of markets, which limits the scope of what governments and even a charismatic and idealistic leader can do. I mean, just look at Liz Truss and what happened to her. So can you imagine if, let's say, Mark Collett, well, that's probably a bad example, but let's say, pick your nationalist superhero, okay? Can you imagine if he's elected into office, he walks into Downing Street on Monday, well, that's usually a bank holiday, so we'll wait till Tuesday. When the markets open, the markets would crash, there'd be capital flight, the pound would tank, all over fears of what they were going to do. The Bank of England would have to step in. On Wednesday, there'd be a run on the banks, breadlines by Thursday, and by Friday they'd be resigning and they'd be out of office. And that'd be it. Boom. Chance to even do anything, rug pulled from under them. Because no government can survive losing the confidence of the markets. Because if you suffer capital flight, then wealth suddenly exits the country, and then that is a lack of revenue for the treasury, and suddenly you can't even service your own debt. So there really are economic forces to which we are behest, and there's a narrow scope as to what can be done. And so when it comes to migration, it really is a politics of incrementalism. And we currently have, again, I'm going to talk about this, Rishi Sunak is actually nominally addressing some of these issues. He has raised the threshold at which skilled workers' wages have to be before they can get a visa to come into the country. Raised it from 26,000 to 38,700. Now, he's not gone far enough because there's some loopholes. I think care workers are a loophole. We need to see that tightened up. He's also set the family visa rate at 38,700. So nobody can bring anybody into the country without themselves earning £38,700. And he's also going to scrap the graduate visa scheme. All these things are attempting to tackle legal migration, as well as the scheme to do with Rwanda as a deterrent for illegal migration. Everybody gets stuck on illegal migration, but really it is legal migration that needs tackling. Now, how did we end up in this mess in the first place? Well, again, it was probably economic forces. If we look at where the huge numbers started coming in, then it was after the COVID pandemic. And you either have to believe, okay, that Boris Johnson got a memo and it said on the top there, top secret, Kalergi plan. We are browning them out of existence by weaponizing migration. Sign here. And he signed it. Rubbed his hands and went, oh, excellent job. Now, you have to either believe that's true or that there's other forces involved. And by the way, that everybody else signs up to this. I think it's equally unlikely that Boris Johnson signs up to the deliberate browning out of us in the country as I do that Rishi Sunak has signed up to it, or that Keir Starmer has signed up to it. I just don't think that that's plausible. I think it's economic pressures that each sector of the economy lobbies and petitions the government to open up routes for low-paid floods of migration to come into the country via visa schemes. I've got Suella Braverman here joining us today again to explain to us a little bit of these problems.
Well, I mean, I think if we take legal migration, for example, whilst in government, I was able to persuade the Prime Minister to take some measures, some minimal measures on students and the dependence on students, because a large number of the people coming into this country are not actually workers, they're actually the dependents of workers or the dependents of students. The foreign students community has skyrocketed in the last few years alone. When I left office, the Prime Minister then did announce another package of measures on workers. So he decided to raise the salary threshold. There's a few other measures on dependence of workers. And I think that change can be achieved by being vocal about what the British people really want. I found that actually I can achieve more outside government than within government because I can speak freely. I was unable to argue the case forcefully with public support from within government. When I was outside government, I was able to make the case much more powerfully in public with a lot of public support. And on that basis, I think the government had to respond. Also, given the numbers of 700,000, which were unprecedented and extremely high.
So she goes on to explain in this interview on trigonometry, by the way, I will leave a link in the description, that at times she even had to chase Jeremy Hunt down the corridor just to get him to listen to her. And you can understand the forces, the economic forces that are at play that stress and pressure government departments, that during economic struggles and downturn in the economy, that would make anybody extremely reluctant to put any kind of brakes on or to turn off any kind of valve that would cause the economy to stop recovering. Whether you agree with that or not. And we can now see that Rishi Sunak, after getting the economy back on track, stabilising the economy, is now nominally addressing the issue of migration and attempting to set his reputation upon it. And immediately, by the way, after doing that, economic pressures are appearing to attempt to stop him from doing that. So we can look at some of them like this in the Financial Times. The UK will pay the price for an international student exodus. Government's tightening of graduate visa rules poses a grave risk to universities and the country. Facing an increasingly hostile environment, the smartest students will look elsewhere for university places, notably the US, where they often receive more generous financial support for postgrad degrees. Some international students are already turning away. According to UCAS, a third of UK universities saw fewer overseas non-EU applicants in 2023. Woohoo! The UK will pay the price for this exodus. International students bring tremendous economic benefits with them, putting nearly 10 times more into the economy than they take out. UK universities also rely on income from international students to subsidise places for British students who pay lower tuition fees. So we can see, again, that the economic pressures are piling on Rishi Sunak. Again in the Financial Times. Just May the 14th. He says he is unswayed by warnings against scrapping the graduate visa programme. It says here, the committee warned cutting overseas student numbers would cause universities substantial financial difficulty and could lead some to fail. So, economic pressures are piling up. And if you think that these aren't real, then you're just oblivious and you're thinking it's some kind of simplistic thing. I know you'd love it to be people sitting around in a dark room, smoking cigars, and saying, we're just going to brown them out. And by the way, I don't doubt that there are some forces out there that would like to achieve that. But when it comes to actual government policy, and somebody like Rishi Sunak, who I do believe at heart is like a colourblind, civic, nationalist light style, moderate conservative, he does want to first get the economy on track and would be extremely reluctant to put any brakes on anything with all the sectors of the economy pressuring him. But now after getting the economy stabilised, is making incremental changes towards reducing both legal and illegal migration. So here's more. Businesses call on Rishi Sunak to protect graduate visas. Multinational businesses, including Siemens and is that Thales, I don't know, have called on the Prime Minister to protect graduate visas to prevent damage to UK research and innovation in a letter from the National Centre for Universities, who has warned that financial pressures from cutting off international graduates from coming to Britain could undermine one of the UK's greatest strategic strengths. And here's an example of that letter, by the way. Potential impact on UK economic growth. And it's signed by the head of Siemens, Anglo-American, EDF Energy, Severn Trent, whatever that is, Thales, UK, Rio Tinto, and Neptune Energy DE. This is just one example of the kinds of economic pressures that anybody who attempts to tackle legal migration routes into this country that have been lobbied for by business and companies over the last 3 decades to liberalise and open up these avenues to cheap labour and excesses of labour face. There are clear warning signs that our good position in the world is at risk. We're deeply concerned by reports of funding gaps as well as sharp declines in international student applications. Woohoo! Again. You can see how the pressures pile up on somebody who is attempting to tackle these issues. Professor Brian Bell, chairman of the Migration Advisory Committee, said that net migration could fall to between 150,000 and 200,000 by September because a ban on foreign students bringing dependents was having a far bigger impact than the government expected. And here's Rishi posting on Twitter, by the way. By the way, this interview with Liz Truss on trigonometry is also worth watching. I'll put the link to this in the description, where she explains the enormity of the forces at work which really tie your hands in government to being able to get anything done.
Made it harder for those policies to be delivered. So I think there's a general problem about the intellectual side, the ability of Conservatives to make arguments. But, we have a situation in Britain where we have a very powerful economic establishment that has a particular set of views and did not like to be challenged. And what I did was challenge those views.
And so,
what exactly are these forces? Are we talking about the civil service and that?
Yes.
but
So the bureaucracy is, of course, it's the civil service itself, but it's also what I call the quangocracy. So organisations like the Office of Budget Responsibility is part of the quangocracy.
The Bank of England is essentially part of the quangocracy. And what do I mean by that? I mean organisations that are not directly democratically accountable, organisations that are appointed to have independent expertise. That's what I'm talking about.
Finally, I do want to talk about one other force that I do think has had a big impact on migration. No, not that. And it's this. Now, you might think this is wacky, but just think about this, the time and place in history that we are. Really, the proliferation of the smartphone has only been around for about 10 years. iPhone 3G was 2008. And that didn't work very, very well in terms of browsing the internet, mobile internet, until, a few years after that. And it really didn't proliferate around the world, particularly in the areas where we're talking about, in poorer countries and around the world. People didn't really start having usable mobile access to the internet until like the mid 2010s, 2013-14. We're really about 10 years of the smartphone in popular use. Just think about that. But the massive cultural impact and impact on consciousness that the smartphone has had, where people have mobile access to the internet on their fingertips and mobile access to social media. And you see it everywhere, where everybody's just walking around staring at them. But also, this access to this information will undoubtedly have played a massive role in the migration of people, just from them being able to find out about other countries and organize, discuss routes, plan, and all this kind of stuff will have been massively enabled by this unique thing in history that has happened in the last 10 years. So this is, to me, undoubtedly another external force. So again, I tend to think that somebody like Rishi Sunak is a colourblind, civic nationalist, light, moderate conservative who first wants to get the economy on track and then actually does want to do something about this and is nominally saying that he is doing something about it and has not had any amount of time really to do anything about it due to only just getting out of economic recession, due to being behest to market forces. And we're about to pull the rug on the only person really who has ever, even nominally, taken action to address this issue. And you can now eviscerate me in the comments. Thank you for watching. Appreciate you.